So when I was here, I felt the weight of history on me. I thought, how can I honor this city by being a part, and how can I be an active creator and participant in this?
That was Kevin Hunsanger. I'm Jeff, and this is Storied San Francisco. Every week on this podcast, you'll hear from business owners, bartenders, artists, and other San Franciscans, telling stories and responding to the question, what is it about this place? Welcome to Season 2, Episode 10, Part 1. It's not every day that you work at your dream job and are offered a chance to own the business. But that's exactly what happened to Kevin when he was selling rare books at Green Apple in the 90s. In this podcast, Kevin will walk us through how he came to be part owner of Green Apple Books. He'll talk about how the store thrived during the .com era, and how it continues to be a force in both the book world and the inner Richmond neighborhood to this day. Here's Kevin.
It was pretty much the two best things in life for me, a girl and a bookstore. I was living in Santa Cruz, and this would have been 1990, 1991, and my girlfriend moved to San Francisco from Santa Cruz. She had a friend who worked at Green Apple. He was a really nice guy. His name's Jeff. He's an artist. He worked in the receiving room. I guess at a point, I just couldn't do without having Michelle in my life, and I thought it was a good excuse for me to leave Santa Cruz, come to the city, and I was 21 at the time.
You mentioned to me being from or having lived in Texas and stuff.
Yeah, I was raised in Texas.
So Santa Cruz wasn't home.
No, Santa Cruz wasn't home. Texas was until 13, 14 years old, and my family moved to Chicago, whereupon my mom immediately realized that those winters are not for her. So she took my sister, moved to the West Coast. I stayed and did my high school time outside Chicago in the Chicagoland area. And then as soon as I was 18, told my dad, see ya, and I headed west, young man.
Nice.
So that's what brought me to Santa Cruz, where I, surfed and worked in a bookstore called Bookworks, which kept me connected to the book community. And when Michelle moved to San Francisco, Jeff, her friend here, said, hey, we've got a place, an opening at Green Apple Books. Would you be interested? And I thought it was a perfect confluence of things. So, yes. So I interviewed over the phone and moved. I was hired while I still lived in Santa Cruz. I never knew Green Apple as a customer. I saw it for the first time when I came in to fill out the paperwork after being hired, and it blew my mind.
Did the bookstore in 1990 look anything like it does now?
It was exactly. The store's always changing.
The main store.
Yeah, the main store. We had the main store. We had, the annex wasn't there yet. Right. That was Revolver Records. But the main store proper, which is the 506 Clement Street, second floor, and we had just opened that side room, which is curious because that's the second floor of the building next door. Mm. So when you're at the second floor of Green Apple and then you go into our side room, you actually go up a step because the two floor levels are not equal. Yeah, so I hope the fire marshal isn't listening to this. But yeah, so that was my first kind of week of work as I was installing bookcases in that side room.
Okay,
so
I was going to ask what job you got hired at.
As a general bookseller. I was a part-time student, not a very good student. I was at City College. I've never really been interested in school. Did not do well at all at any point. But for whatever reason, I thought, an English degree, so the best I could do then would be to be a teacher and stay in school the rest of my life. But then I discovered Green Apple, and within the first 6 months of being there, I had fallen into the wonderful world of used and rare books, which the two bookstores that I worked at before being at Green Apple were all new books. And this is an entirely different thing. It was more of a guild. I discovered that I could go to a bookstore, and at that time there were 3 bookstores, used bookstores on Clement Street. So at my lunchtime, I could actually grab a sandwich, go to another bookstore, find an underpriced book, come back to work, sell it to our used book buyers, and double my money, pay for lunch, and everything's Jake. So once I learned that trick, it was all over for me. I was a lifer. Green Apple was accepting resumes from like Phi Beta Kappas at Stanford and the like. And I thought, this would be my best case scenario anyway, even if I did succeed at standard school.
Right.
So I said, the heck with it. I went full time, was mentored by the original owner of the store, learned the used and rare craft, and a couple of years later, he extended the invitation for myself and 2 other long-term employees to buy the store from him.
Can you tell me a little bit about that original owner?
His name was Richard Savoy. He started the store in 1967. And like water seeking its own level, it continued to expand and evolve with the flood of books coming in. So he really understood the marketplace. He was really interested in the culture of the book. It was started very soon after City Lights, which was the first sort of paperback book publisher and bookstore. So a very democratic approach to book selling. You think booksellers before that were maybe a little bit hoity-toity. The carriage trade. Fine bindings and things of that nature. But with City Lights doing sort of its affordable paperback, so everyone can read a book, and Rich Savoy kind of took the used book market. It was originally a used bookstore with focusing on graphic novel, comic books at that time. So the late 60s underground comics. The store was opened in 1967. And so he kind of, he along with City Lights, really made books available to the general public in a very affordable way.
But what was happening to books with the advent of TV and other forms of media? Were books struggling as a business or what was going on?
Well, when I started at Green Apple, and that's really when I kind of came up as a bookseller, I worked at a Barnes and Noble in the Chicago area for a brief time, and then it was a small independent store in Santa Cruz area called Bookworks in Aptos. But I never really got the big picture. Right. And Green Apple will anybody that walks in that store will immediately get a big picture.
Yes.
It's an extraordinary place. So it really opened my eyes to, as you say, like that tradition of book selling that I never experienced before. And I think that books were a very, they were your real entertainment, the only entertainment you had for just hundreds of years since Gutenberg. I mean, that was it. There was no movie theater, there was no television. And even when I was a kid, television had 3 channels and UHF, and you had to get up off the couch and go click,
yeah,
and then fiddle with the antenna to watch garbage.
Right.
It was all worthless. But that's what you had, or you had books. Right. And so books were really, they were everything. So in 1991, when I started at Green Apple, I felt it was a high water mark for book selling, for independent booksellers. We were defeating the chains. There was a Crown Books on Clement Street, and very soon after I came into Green Apple, I don't say it's my doing, but the Crown Books closed. So it was nice. So really, independent bookselling was winning at that point. It was before Borders came in. There was this real little sweet spot. Now, Borders was an incredible store. It was an independent bookstore out of Michigan, and when they opened in San Francisco on Union Square,
not far from here.
Yeah, just around the corner from where we're at now. We went down and did a scouting trip. They had extraordinarily deep backlist inventory. So, the principals of Green Apple went down and scouted that store and saw what they were doing successfully. And we would call titles. We go, oh, that's an interesting title. So, it was, again, way before the internet, so you couldn't just go to Amazon and go, well, what are some books on, I want to develop our film noir section. Right. So I'm going to see what, we'll Google film noir books, and so you really did have to scout, and you had to go and be involved,
take notes, and have knowledge in your head.
Absolutely.
And recall.
And that was really something with the used and rare books. For many years I had like this, and a lot of it's drifted because you just don't need to know it anymore.
Right.
But I could walk into any bookstore, any place, any used bookstore anywhere in the world, and I would find an underpriced book, and I just knew that this book they priced for $10 is a $500 book. Wow. And I would have the customers that could sell that. And it wasn't even, like, oh, that's this book. You'd have to open the book and look and go, maybe this is, maybe it isn't. I have to check page 47 to see if the period is misplaced between these 2 words or something. All these points and all these different, so
like misprints and weird,
exactly,
rare stuff.
Exactly. So that's what I carried around with me for decades. During that. So it really was more. I think bookselling at that time was more of a guild,
Right.
to learn about rare books, to learn about the book selling trade. You had to be, mentored. You had to learn it from someone else. And in the used and rare books, the people that are teaching you this are the people who make their money doing it. So it was almost like honor among thieves, so how do you get a thief to tell you their tricks?
Right.
It was a really special time.
Yeah.
And it's a time that will never happen again.
So 91, you got the job. What year was it that and you said it was you and a few others who were asked to come into the ownership?
Yes, myself and another Kevin and a Pete. So 2 Kevins and a Pete, the 3 of us bought the store.
Excuse me. Did he say why you 3?
Well, he had run it hands-on for 30-some years himself. I think it was 30 years, and was involved in viniculture. He grew grapes in Boonville and really wanted to sort of reinvent himself, and he did. He did a great job with that, and very successful. Yeah, Boonville's a great place. I visited his farms on numerous occasions and fell head over heels.
Valley in general.
Yeah,
I love it up there.
Yeah, it's spectacular for sure. So yes, myself as the used and rare guy, which is a major portion of Green Apple's operations. The other Kevin Ryan, handled all the new book operations. And then Pete Mulvihill was the store's general manager, would sort of interface with, employees and bookkeeping and things like that. So it really was a perfect balance of, personalities and job responsibilities. And it was
expertises,
perhaps. Yeah. Well, we had a wonderful opportunity to, learn while doing. Very soon after I started at Green Apple, it became unionized, which is kind of unique. It still is a union shop, but far being it from being a deterrent or something like that for an owner of a store. I thought as a young man of my early 20s, all of a sudden coming up at the helm of one of the San Francisco institutions. As a poor student, I'd never taken business classes. I'd never done anything like that. Well, the union contract, for example, gave me a foundation from which to work from.
Wow, it was bottom up.
Yeah, it really was. So we did learn while doing, and
awesome.
and that's the kind of store that has always been, would allow you to kind of find your own place there. And if you had an interest and you had a talent, the store would allow you to nurture that and to develop that. If it benefited the store, and yourself, Savoy would always give you that, that ability. I had a separate standalone rare book business while I was a used book buyer for him. He allowed me to pursue a completely, the same thing I was getting paid by him to do outside of that store.
Selling in the store, or?
Sometimes I would. The store would be my customer also. But, at times if I scouted a book, I have wonderful relationships and still do with many of the other booksellers in the country. So if I find a book that I know I have a customer for, he would allow me to do that, to sell outside. The store stock was the store stock, but a lot of times, I would be able to sell a Green Apple book to my customer and take a little finder fee. He would allow that, vice versa. If I had a personal book that I would sell to a store's customer that I met through Green Apple, I would give them a little bit of something, sort of a gentleman's agreement. Cool. And so it was, it really allowed us, all the flexibility and the ability to grow and to learn.
Sounds like a fostering environment.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Very
and
much so.
Sorry, what year was it that you guys took over?
So I would say that probably began, and we're getting back, decades. So I'll have to do a little math here. It was a 10-year buyout. So we bought one share of store stock every year. It was very unique. We spent the first year of our partnership, so outside of that 10 years, to put the contract together, which we've shared with other bookstores too. And it's kind of a lot of people build a bookstore and they work and they bring it up in 25, 30 years, and then the store will never be worth what it is outside of the employees or outside of that situation. You can't Green Apple's value, it would be a smattering compared to, if we got a buyer from outside of the war, outside of our network,
right?
And they come in and buy it, they would. But if we could sell it to staff, that know how important this is, that know what this sort of true value is, it's worth more. So we work to try to find a way to make that possible for us to happen. So it was a 10-year buy out of the store's profits, sweat equity, basically. Mm-hmm. Let's say 15, 20, that would have been 20 years ago that ball got started, maybe 20 more.
So mid to late 90s.
Mid, late 90s, yeah.
You had been there for a few years.
Maybe 4 years, I think 5 years at that point. Not that long.
Yeah. And you said you were pretty still in your 20s.
Mm-hmm.
So now it's like you had come to San Francisco and other shit was going on in San Francisco. Like, let's not kid ourselves.
Oh, it sure was.
Like, that's .com1, like
right.
That was going on, and you're
right.
like, I moved here, I've got this. What was that like for you? I mean,
you
found a sweet spot.
I found a sweet spot. I definitely felt like because what was also flourishing then was San Francisco's sort of the spoken word scene. Mm-hmm. I thought that the literary community was exploding. As I said, these years were extraordinarily fruitful years for independent bookselling, independent publishing. People were really participatory in the arts in San Francisco at that time. So when I was here, I felt the weight of history on me. I thought, how can I honor this city by being a part, and how can I be an active creator and participant in this? So I had honor, so when the .com thing came through, it was exciting because I felt like I was working on a parallel path. I actually at that time I was a video game reviewer. I was pretty involved in sort of that. I was getting paid $1 a word by GameSpot to do online video game reviews.
That's not a bad gig.
Killing.
Holy crap.
There was a point I was thinking of, like, this was before I was offered to buy the store, so that gives it a good frame of reference, a good time frame. I was thinking of going down to part-time to take a real stab at, like, oh god, I'm making thousands of dollars a month just on video game reviews.
Just playing video games and then writing about it.
Yeah, exactly. $1 a word. I mean, you weren't getting that from Esquire, this is some serious money, good. And I thought, okay, I'm going to make a go at this. And then GameSpot said, all of a sudden, just like, oh no, we're doing everything in house. Sorry, the gravy train dried up and it's all over. And I was like, oh, thank goodness I didn't quit.
Yeah.
And really quickly thereafter, the offer was on the table to buy the store, so couldn't say no to that. It was fun. I had a lot of people, and a lot of friends that were involved in the tech industry. But it felt like, you guys go have your fun. We're doing the real thing here. Mm-hmm. The first .com bubble or whatever, it didn't feel real. It didn't feel like it existed, where, brick and mortar store, something with, years and years of history and tradition, like a Green Apple, like a City Lights, it felt like we were doing the good Lord's work.
Yeah. I was going to say, like, that phrase, e-commerce, which feels so dated now, but that was a thing in the late night. Like, that was, it was like, oh, we're gonna everything. But there still wasn't the force with which you see it today, like in the Amazons and whatever.
No, we took a stab at that. Rich he was always the kind of guy who said, okay, here's a new thing, we're going to try to take advantage of that, and he instilled that with us. Looking back on my time at Green Apple and my partnership with the people I worked with, we were always aggressive. We would always try a new thing. We embraced technology from the very beginning. Our social media has always been par excellence. It's very important.
I'll agree with that.
Yeah,
100%.
it's very important that you constantly, if you're not constantly challenging yourself and you're not constantly trying to evolve, things go past you.
Yeah.
And it's just inevitable. So Rich was one of the very first to say, okay, we're going to start selling books online. And we put 100,000 books online in a warehouse in South City. He invested a lot of money and a lot of time, a lot of effort, he and I, to try to make that work. In fact, it didn't the scale that we were trying to do. Either you had to go really big or really niche. And now we still have about 4,000, I say we, Green Apple has about 4,000 used books online, but they're very, very targeted, very specific things, and they're off the sales floor. They're in a separate location. What was most important to me is that when you come to Green Apple, those books are for you, the customer who makes the effort of coming to the store. If you put a good book up online, a rare book, a desirable book, it'll sell in 5 minutes to somebody in Nebraska. You might as well really never even have that book. If that's going to be your business model, don't have a storefront. So it was a very delicate balance for a long time to try to find that.
Versus if you have a store, then you have that human interaction.
Yeah.
Maybe a conversation. And
absolutely.
And who knows what else after that.
Right.
It's tactile. It's a different experience altogether.
No, for sure. Well, I think over the years, definitely there was a high water mark of, I loved the rare books and the hyper modern. I think in the 80s, the art market collapsed, the speculators in the art world, and they started putting all their money into rare, like hyper modern rare books. I say hyper modern, like books published in the second half of the 20th century. So one that springs immediately to mind is Cold Mountain. It was a National Book Award winner. It was a very popular title. But while it was still available in hardcover, we would have the new book that might be in its 57th printing or something like that we're selling, as a new copy at the list price. We would also maybe have remaindered copies. So these are books that have been returned to the publishers from, say, something like a Costco or whatever, and then outside companies would buy them in bulk and then sell them in bulk at, pennies on the dollar. So then we could have it as a new book at list price, as a remainder for, $4.98. And then I would have the first edition, for $300-$400. They're all essentially the same book. They look the same. They read the same. They feel the same. Yeah. There are no differences. But I was
tell Jimmy Collector that.
Yeah, well, Jimmy Collector found that out because that market collapsed too. But that was really fun for quite a few years. That was, it really was. It felt like our own little .com bubble in there, Yeah. So that was a great thing. I also really enjoyed working with authors and working, out in the community, removing the podium from author events, putting these authors in bars or in, outside venues, clubs, where people weren't expecting to see an author or to hear an author read. I would always try to marry the author with the venue, so it would always kind of sync up right. And the way that that symbiosis resonated with the community was extraordinary, and it's something that I'm going to hope to continue to do. Something of that for the rest of my life. That was definitely a game changer.
Yeah, we'll talk about. Well, because they're just. At the end of the day, they're just people.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's have something more relaxed and
more
casual and more normal.
Right. And it breaks down the barriers, So to hear an author read and not have to wait in line to have your book signed, but sit next to him at the bar and, maybe, hey, this book's special because, Johnny author spilled his bourbon on it. It's great. There's a signature, but look, that's his, that's his peanut shell or something. I don't know, but it would connect people in a much more genuine way. Every year was a highlight. Yeah. That place was really special. It still is very special.
We're talking 20-ish at least years.
Yeah, I was at Green Apple Books for almost 28 years. Yeah. In my 28th year now, I guess. So the ties to the community, there's really just, you just can't, I can't overstate how that a used bookstore has this symbiotic relationship with its customers. As an owner, as a principal, as a driving force of that store for almost 30 years, I do feel I had a hand in its development, but nothing like the people that would sell their books to us on a daily basis. They were literally building that store every single day.
Double meaning of literally.
And I would never know from day to day what I would experience. Granted, I would kind of do a similar job, buying the used books, pricing the used books, working the floor, with staff, this and that. But every single day was different because I didn't know if I would get a call to go buy a world-class library of, 5,000 books of, or one day I was at lunch and I'm just kind of working at the buy counter, snacking on some Cheetos, having a little snack, and someone literally comes in with 2 letters from Leo Tolstoy.
Wow.
They wanted to sell these, and I had to wipe the Cheeto schmutz off my fingers before I started looking at these letters from Tolstoy, and I said, "These are nice, thank you. They're a little bit out of our league. I think there's an auction house, I can refer you to that would be better suited for these." So
Wow.
really, every day was a new day.
But that's kind of an honor also that someone thought of you for those.
Yeah,
I mean, it's
yeah,
just a little off. But.
Sure. No, it's we have customers that I've seen once a week for almost 30 years, and then meeting new people, great new people every day. And just it was really explosive in the community, the ties to the community. I've never experienced anything, and I never will experience anything like it.
That was Kevin Hunsanger. Check back Thursday when Kevin will talk about his next project, a San Francisco Cultural History Museum. Music for the podcast is by Otis McDonald. Film photography is by Michelle Kilfeather. Please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay up to date on everything we do. Dig through our past episodes, which are up on our website, storiedsf.com. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please rate and review the show. Send comments, suggestions, or whatever's on your mind to storiedsf@gmail.com. Thanks for listening.